Marcus Holloway opened the security app at 11:47 p.m., expecting to catch her stealing 14 caregivers before Rosa Martinez had failed him. Stolen jewelry, falsified therapy logs, left his daughters crying in soiled sheets. So when he saw those 3 wheelchairs sitting empty against the living room wall, his chest tightened. Then the camera angle shifted, and he saw them. His 3 paralyzed daughters, Isabella, Grace, and Lily, standing barefoot on the hardwood floor, holding hands in matching yellow overalls, giggling as they stepped toward Rosa's outstretched arms. Marcus's bourbon glass shattered against his desk. His vision blurred. His phone slipped from his hand, and the man who built a tech empire on algorithms and logic watched the impossible unfold on a screen in his own home. 18 months ago, Marcus Holloway lost the woman who made him human. Catherine died 3 weeks after a catastrophic car accident left their 2-year-old triplets with severe spinal injuries. The drunk driver walked away with scratches. Catherine held on long enough to kiss each daughter goodbye. Isabella first, then Grace, then Lily, then slipped away in the ICU while Marcus begged her to stay. No warning, no time to prepare. Just a cold hospital room and 3 small girls who would never remember their mother's face. The neurologists didn't wait long to deliver the second blow. Permanent paralysis from the waist down, all 3 girls. The kind of spinal damage that doesn't heal, doesn't improve, doesn't give second chances. Mr. Holloway, we need you to understand. 0 chance of recovery. Wheelchair dependent for life. We're very sorry. Marcus heard the words, but they didn't land. Not then. He was 34 years old, worth $847 million, and powerless to fix the only thing that mattered. He threw money at the problem anyway. The best pediatric rehabilitation center in the country. Physical therapists with Ivy League credentials and 6-figure retainers. Experimental treatments insurance wouldn't touch. Stem cell consultations in Switzerland. Robotic exoskeletons. Hyperbaric oxygen chambers. Nothing worked. The girls stopped smiling. Marcus stopped trying. And somewhere in that first year, he buried his hope right next to Catherine. Then came the caregivers, 14 and 15 months. The first quit after 2 weeks. Said watching paralyzed toddlers was too emotionally draining. The second stole Catherine's jewelry. $40,000 worth of heirlooms Marcus had been saving for the girls. The third seemed perfect until she posted photos of Isabella's medical equipment on social media for sympathy engagement. Praying for this precious angel with a GoFundMe link Marcus knew nothing about. After that, something broke inside him. One caregiver falsified therapy logs for 4 months straight. Another accessed his financial accounts and disappeared with $15,000. 3 quit within days, overwhelmed. Each one came with a resume and references and a smile. Each one left with his trust bleeding out behind them. Marcus stopped seeing people. He started seeing risks. He installed cameras in every room, every hallway, every corner, motion sensors on doors, audio monitoring in the therapy room. He spent his evenings reviewing footage, rewinding, zooming, looking for the lie, the angle, the betrayal he knew was coming. Control became his only protection. Surveillance was the only relationship he could trust. So when Rosa Martinez walked through his front door on a Tuesday morning, 35 years old, quiet, composed, carrying a single suitcase and a resume that barely filled half a page, Marcus didn't see a person. He saw the 15th failure waiting to happen. No improvising, he told her without looking up from her file. No bonding, no hope speeches. You follow the medical protocol exactly as written. The doctors have made their prognosis clear. These girls will never walk. Your job is care maintenance, not miracles. Do you understand? Rosa nodded slowly. I understand, Mr. Holloway. She paused. But may I ask, what do the girls like? Marcus looked up for the first time. The question caught him off guard. What did his daughters like? He didn't know the answer. But Rosa didn't wait for one. She'd already moved toward the therapy room where Isabella, Grace, and Lily sat in their custom wheelchairs, staring at nothing. And from that first day, Rosa Martinez did not follow his rules. She sang to the girls in Spanish while changing them. Old lullabies Marcus didn't understand, but that made his daughters' faces soften. She talked to them like they could become anything, not like they were broken. She called them princesas and mis amores, and whispered encouragement like she believed they could hear her, like she believed they could become more than their diagnosis. And Marcus watched it all, through his cameras. At first, he watched to catch her making mistakes, to document the violations, to build his case for termination. Then he watched because he couldn't look away. Because something was happening in that house, something small at first. Isabella laughed at one of Rosa's silly songs, actually laughed. For the first time in 8 months, Grace reached for Rosa when she entered the room, tiny fingers stretching toward warmth. Lily, who hadn't spoken a word since the accident, whispered, "Rosa," one morning at breakfast. Marcus told himself it meant nothing. He told himself hope was dangerous. He told himself the doctors knew best. But late at night, alone in his office, with the blue glow of monitors lighting his face, Marcus watched a woman with no credentials and no training fight for his daughters, with nothing but patience and belief. And somewhere deep in his chest, in a place he thought had died with Catherine, something started to crack. He didn't trust it. He couldn't. Because hope, when you've buried it that deep, doesn't feel like relief. It feels like a trap. But before we go any further, hit that subscribe button and tell me in the comments, have you ever been afraid to hope again? Have you ever felt like believing might hurt more than staying numb? This story is for you. Because sometimes miracles don't ask permission. They just show up in the hands of a woman who refuses to accept the impossible. Now, let us continue. The mansion woke up the same way every morning. Quiet. Not peaceful quiet. The kind of quiet that presses against your chest and makes you forget what laughter sounds like. Marcus stood at the kitchen window, bourbon from the night before still sour in his mouth, watching the sun rise over the back garden. The gardener was already out there trimming hedges that no one walked past anymore. The fountain in the center of the lawn hadn't run in 7 months. Marcus kept meaning to call someone about it. He never did. What was the point of flowing water when nothing else in this house moved? Behind him, down the long hallway that led to the east wing, he heard the soft mechanical whir of a motorized wheelchair. The night nurse was moving one of the girls. Probably Grace. Grace liked to sit by the therapy room window when the morning light came through just right, casting golden rectangles across the floor. Marcus didn't turn around. He used to. In the beginning, right after they came home from the hospital, Marcus would rush to every sound, every cry, every small movement. He would sit between their medical beds for hours, watching their tiny chests rise and fall, terrified that if he looked away, something would go wrong. Catherine would have been better at this. She had wanted children more than anything. 5 years of trying, 3 rounds of IVF, 2 miscarriages that nearly broke her. And when she finally got pregnant with triplets, she cried for 3 days straight. Happy tears. The kind that come when something you've ached for finally becomes real. Marcus remembered the nursery she designed. Pale yellow walls, A hand-painted mural of elephants and giraffes. 3 cribs arranged in a half circle so the girls could see each other when they woke up. She'd spent weeks choosing the perfect mobile, the softest blankets, the gentlest night lights. That nursery sat empty now. The girls slept in medical beds in the therapy room. Adjustable frames, safety rails, monitors that tracked their breathing and heart rates through the night. The yellow room with the animal mural had become storage for equipment they'd tried once and abandoned. Standing frames, gait trainers, adaptive toys that promised engagement but delivered nothing. Marcus took a sip of cold coffee and winced. The house was too big. 27 rooms for a man who only used 3. His office, his bedroom, the kitchen when he remembered to eat. Everything else felt like a museum, preserved but lifeless, filled with furniture no one touched and spaces no one occupied. He'd bought this Connecticut estate for Catherine. She loved old architecture, the stone walls, the vaulted ceilings, the history embedded in every beam. "It feels like a home that has stories to tell," she'd said the first time they walked through it. Now the only stories were the ones Marcus replayed on security footage at 2 in the morning. He set the coffee mug in the sink and walked toward his office. The hallway stretched long and dim, lined with faint rectangular outlines on the wallpaper where family photos used to hang. Catherine had insisted on them. "Houses need faces," she'd said. "Otherwise, they're just buildings." Marcus had taken them down 6 months after she died. He couldn't pass her smile 20 times a day. Couldn't see the hope in her eyes, the way she looked at him like he could fix anything, like their future was certain and bright and full of the life they'd planned. He'd failed her, failed their daughters. Failed every promise he'd made in that ICU when he held her hand and told her he'd take care of them. The frames left ghosts on the walls, outlines of a life that almost happened. Marcus pushed open his office door and sat at his desk. 3 monitors glowed on the wall: living room, hallway, therapy room. There they were, his daughters. Isabella sat in her pink wheelchair, staring at the bookshelf. Grace was by the window, just like he'd guessed. Lily's eyes were closed, her small body still except for the gentle rise and fall of breathing. And Rosa moved between them, adjusting blankets, straightening toys. Her movements slow and deliberate, like she understood that this room held something fragile. Marcus watched her hands. 14 caregivers, 14 failures, 14 reasons to believe she would be no different. But she'd been here 3 weeks now. No complaints, no shortcuts, no phone calls she shouldn't make or cabinets she shouldn't open. Just quiet, unsettling consistency. That's what worried him most. Rosa had a routine. Every morning she arrived in the therapy room at exactly 7 a.m. She'd greet the night nurse, review the girls' sleep charts, check medication logs, and then she'd spend the first 10 minutes just sitting with them, not talking, not adjusting anything, just present. Marcus noticed this through the cameras. It bothered him at first. He was paying her $28 an hour to work, not to sit idle. But then he realized something. She wasn't idle. She was watching, learning, studying the way Isabella's fingers curled when she was uncomfortable, the way Grace's breathing changed when she needed repositioning, the way Lily's eyes flickered beneath closed lids during her morning rest cycle. Rosa was learning his daughters in a way Marcus had stopped trying to. On her 4th morning, Rosa brought a small portable speaker into the therapy room. Nothing fancy, just a black cylinder she pulled from her canvas bag. She set it on the shelf and pressed play. Soft piano music filled the room. Something classical, delicate, the kind of music Catherine used to play on Sunday mornings. Marcus watched from his office, finger hovering over the intercom button. This wasn't protocol. The girls had specific sound therapy sessions on Thursdays, administered by a licensed therapist with a treatment plan. Random music wasn't part of the routine, but he didn't press the button, because Isabella turned her head. It was small, just a few degrees to the right, but Marcus saw it clearly on the screen. His daughter, who spent most days staring at the same spot on the wall, turned toward the sound. Rosa noticed too. She didn't make a fuss, didn't clap or celebrate. She just smiled softly and adjusted the volume slightly higher. Grace's fingers twitched against her armrest. Marcus leaned closer to the monitor. Rosa knelt beside Grace's wheelchair, her movements slow and intentional. She didn't touch Grace right away, just positioned herself in the little girl's line of sight and waited. "You like that, mi amor?" Rosa asked quietly. "It's Chopin. My grandmother used to play it on Sunday mornings when I was small." Grace didn't respond, but her fingers twitched again. Rosa reached out and placed her hand near Grace's, not touching, just close enough that the warmth could be felt if Grace wanted it. She stayed like that for a long moment. Patient, unhurried, present. Marcus's throat tightened. When was the last time he'd sat with his daughters like that? When was the last time he'd just been present? Without an agenda, without checking vitals or reviewing therapy reports or calculating how much the latest specialist consultation was costing per hour? He couldn't remember. That afternoon, Marcus found himself walking toward the therapy room. He told himself he needed to check the equipment, verify that everything was properly maintained and functioning. But when he reached the door and heard Rosa's voice inside, soft, singing something in Spanish, he stopped. His hand hovered over the doorknob, and for reasons he couldn't explain, Marcus Holloway turned around and walked back to his office, where he could watch his daughters through a screen instead of standing in the same room with them. Marcus Holloway's mansion looked magnificent from the outside. Tall windows gleaming across 3 stories of white stone, delicately pruned hedges lining the circular drive, and 2 marble lions frozen forever at the mahogany front doors. But inside, the house felt wrong. Preserved, but lifeless. A grand museum to a life that had ended and refused to move forward. 27 rooms obediently awaited their purpose. But Marcus used only 3, his office, his bedroom, and occasionally the kitchen if the night was particularly cold and sleep especially distant. The vast formal living room echoed with steps and the faint whir of wheelchair wheels, but no laughter. It was always just one sound at a time, swallowed by the volume of space, as though the house itself consumed everything that might make it a home. You felt the temperature difference immediately. A cool, weighty air clinging to the marble floors and tall, arching halls. The scent of polish mixed with something older, deeper. Perhaps the faint ghost of 1,000 unopened books and decades of closed curtains. Even sunlight, when it climbed through double-height windows, seemed diluted by the scale of the rooms and the chill of lonely architecture. Catherine, Marcus's wife, had insisted on warmth when they first moved in. The nursery was proof. Pale yellow walls brushed with elephants and giraffes. Soft armchairs arranged among 3 tiny cribs she'd picked out with careful joy. That room should have been the heart of the house. Instead, it became the graveyard for failed promises. Medical beds with cold safety rails, disassembled therapy frames, mothballed equipment, and a silence so full of longing, Marcus only opened the door if he had to retrieve an invoice. The mural faded slowly. No small hands traced it anymore. Family photos, portraits, vacation smiles, those precious candids Catherine loved, used to line the main hall. Their frames had all come down 6 months after her accident. Their absence was as visible as their presence had ever been. Paler rectangles on the wallpaper, faint rectangular ghosts marching down the corridor. Too painful to look at hope on the walls, Marcus told himself. So he let the mansion grow sterile and the loneliness multiply in every empty room. His mornings became ritualized. He would wake at 6 whether he wanted to or not, slide out of bed without disturbing the untouched cover on Catherine's side, and tread barefoot past the silent nursery. The kitchen was always cold, the percolator grumbling to life as Marcus watched the gardener move soundlessly past the untended fountain in the back garden. The fountain was ornate and meant to be the centerpiece, but Marcus never used it. He kept meaning to call someone for repairs, never did. What was the point? Water didn't move in this house. Nothing did. He drank his coffee standing, not sitting, stiff as if he couldn't bear to belong to the room. By 7, he would retreat to his office. 3 monitors, 3 camera feeds, living room, hallway, therapy room, all watching. He watched his daughters not as a father, but as a warden desperate to confirm nothing new had gone wrong. Presence through pixels, emotion at arm's length. It was not always this way. The first caregiver lasted 2 weeks. She wept in the staff kitchen and quit. "Too sad," she said. The second smiled and seemed trustworthy. Marcus discovered she'd stolen Catherine's jewelry box, pearls and all, barely a month in. The third? She posted photos of the girls' modified wheelchairs on social media, launching a support page for sympathy engagement that went viral. They found the link before Marcus did. After that, the failures ran together, a grim parade. The fourth caregiver, falsely signing off on hours of therapy undone. The fifth, whom Marcus trusted with financial access, quietly emptied $15,000 and vanished. 3 more, hired and gone within days, no explanation, only a note left on the slate. "Can't handle it. Sorry." One caregiver caught pocketing pain medication. One who, despite references, locked herself in her phone for hours while the girls sat unmoving in their chairs. Others committed small shames, neglect, privacy violations, verbal swipes Marcus found only later on audio logs. Each time the interviews grew colder. Marcus stopped hoping. He stopped seeing people at all. Everyone was a risk, a vector for pain. He installed surveillance in every corridor, every child's room, every place trust might be broken. The motion sensors beeped in his dreams long after he'd clicked the off switch. Every night, Marcus would sit with his bourbon and rewind the day's footage. Sometimes he zoomed on Rosa's hands, checking for trembling. Sometimes he froze on the empty therapy room, as if staring long enough would explain why the girls had become even more remote. He played the betrayal reel on loop, unable to look away. Control, scrubbing through files, cross-checking logs, reading background checks 3 times, was all he had left. He was not their father. Not anymore. He was the gatekeeper of disappointment. And as months passed, Isabella, always the most sensitive, began to waste away. She refused food, refused to smile, her eyes growing dull and remote. Blood work results warned of dangerous decline. Grace and Lily grew quieter, almost invisible, sitting in their wheelchairs or lying on medical beds for hours. Even the night nurse, a reliable presence, looked worried and tired now. Marcus stared at the application folder for caregiver number 15, Rosa's slim file, his resolve brittle. He had no more faith to spend, but Isabella's doctor left him no choice. She won't last another month like this. Desperation drove him, not hope, not really. Just the hard, necessary reflex to keep his daughters alive one more day. So, 16 months after Catherine's death, Marcus stared out the window as the gardener trimmed the same hedge, past the broken fountain and the faded mural, waiting for the rustle of a suitcase at the door. The house creaked in its emptiness, preserved perfectly in the shape of grief. And Marcus waited, heart cold, for a miracle he stopped believing in a long time ago. Rosa Martinez arrived on a Tuesday morning with a single suitcase and a resume that barely filled half a page. Marcus watched from the upstairs window as she stepped out of a taxi, her movements slow and deliberate, as if she were conserving energy for something more important than first impressions. She wore a simple navy dress, her dark hair pulled back in a neat bun, and carried herself with a quiet composure that Marcus immediately distrusted. Composure could be practiced. Smiles could be rehearsed. He'd learned that the hard way. He met her at the door, file in hand, already scanning for disqualifications. "Rosa Martinez?" he asked without extending his hand. "Yes, Mr. Holloway. Thank you for seeing me." Her voice was soft but steady, lightly accented. Marcus flipped open her file and skimmed the summary he'd already memorized. 35 years old, born in Guatemala, no formal medical training, no certifications from recognized institutions. Just a single line that read, 10 years caring for disabled mother, stroke-induced paralysis, until her passing in 2023. "You're underqualified," Marcus said flatly, not bothering to soften the blow. "I need someone with pediatric rehabilitation experience. Certifications, references from medical facilities." Rosa nodded, absorbing the rejection without flinching. "I understand, Mr. Holloway, but I have experience with paralysis recovery. My mother couldn't walk or speak after her stroke. The doctors said she never would. But after 3 years, she could move her legs, feed herself, say my name." She paused. "I learned by doing, by believing recovery was possible." Marcus's jaw tightened. Hope speeches. Exactly what he didn't need. "The doctors have made their prognosis clear for my daughters," he said coldly. "Permanent paralysis, no recovery. Your job, if I hire you, is care maintenance, not miracles. Do you understand?" "I understand," Rosa said quietly. Then she tilted her head slightly. "But may I ask, Mr. Holloway, what do the girls like?" The question landed like a stone in still water. Marcus stared at her, file frozen in his hands. What did his daughters like? Isabella used to hum when Catherine sang to her. Grace once smiled at butterflies. Lily loved the sound of rain on windows. But that was before the accident, before the wheelchairs, before Marcus started watching them through cameras instead of sitting beside them. Marcus's throat closed. "That's not relevant to the position." Rosa's expression didn't change, but something softened in her eyes. Not pity, something closer to understanding. "May I meet them?" she asked gently, "before we discuss salary or schedules?" Marcus hesitated. Every instinct screamed to send her away. She wasn't qualified. She was too calm, too earnest, too much like the caregivers who'd smiled before betraying him. But Isabella's doctor's voice echoed in his mind. She won't last another month like this. "Follow me," Marcus said curtly. He led Rosa down the long hallway to the therapy room, each step amplifying the silence. When he pushed open the door, the familiar scene greeted them. Isabella in her pink wheelchair by the bookshelf, staring at nothing. Grace by the window, head tilted toward light she didn't seem to see. Lily with her eyes closed, small body motionless except for breathing. Rosa stopped in the doorway. For a long moment, she just looked at them. Not with clinical assessment or professional detachment, but with something Marcus couldn't name. Then she walked slowly into the room and knelt down, positioning herself at eye level with Isabella. "Buenos dias, princesa," Rosa said softly. "My name is Rosa." Isabella didn't respond. Her gaze remained fixed on the same spot it always did. Rosa didn't seem discouraged. She moved to Grace next, kneeling beside her wheelchair. "Hola, mi amor. I'm Rosa. That's a beautiful yellow shirt you're wearing." She smiled. "Do you like yellow? Is it your favorite color?" Silence. Grace's eyes flickered once, then settled back into their distant stare. Rosa moved to Lily, the smallest of the three. She gently touched the armrest of Lily's wheelchair, not the child herself. Just close enough to announce her presence without intrusion. "Hello, sweet Lily," Rosa whispered. "I know you can hear me. I'm going to take care of you. All three of you. Is that okay?" Marcus stood in the doorway, finger hovering over his phone, ready to press the intercom button and correct this breach of protocol. She was asking questions like they could answer, talking to them like they were whole. This was exactly the kind of false hope that would break them, break him, when it inevitably failed. But he didn't press the button, because Isabella's fingers twitched. Rosa stayed kneeling for another minute, then rose and turned to Marcus. "They're beautiful," she said simply. "When do I start?" Marcus wanted to say never. Wanted to show her the door and find someone with credentials, someone who followed rules, someone who wouldn't make him hope. Instead, he heard himself say, "Tomorrow, 7 a.m., no improvising, no bonding. Follow the medical protocol exactly. Do you understand?" "I understand, Mr. Holloway." The next morning, Marcus watched from his office as Rosa entered the therapy room at exactly 7 a.m. She greeted the night nurse, reviewed the sleep charts, checked medication logs, everything by the book. Then she did something that made Marcus lean closer to the monitor. She sat down. Not working, not adjusting equipment. Just sitting in the center of the room, legs crossed, hands folded in her lap, watching the girls the way they watched the walls. Patiently, without agenda. Marcus's finger hovered over the intercom. He was paying her $28 an hour to work, not meditate. But then Rosa began to hum. It was soft at first, almost inaudible through the camera's speakers. A melody Marcus didn't recognize. Something old and gentle. The kind of song passed down through generations. She hummed while she prepared Isabella's morning feeding tube. Hummed while she repositioned Grace's cushions. Hummed while she checked Lily's vitals. And Isabella's face, tight and distant for months, softened. By midday, Rosa was changing Isabella's diaper when she began to sing. Not humming now, but actual words in Spanish. A lullaby Catherine might have sung if she'd lived long enough. Marcus watched Isabella's expression transform. The tension around her mouth eased. Her shoulders, perpetually hunched, relaxed slightly. Rosa spoke to her the entire time, voice gentle and sure. "You have such beautiful, strong legs, Grace. They're just learning a new way to work. Your body is so smart, mi amor. It remembers everything." Marcus's chest tightened. This wasn't protocol. This was exactly what he'd forbidden. Talking to them like they could become something they couldn't. Like hope was safe, but Isabella wasn't crying. For the first time in weeks. She wasn't crying during her diaper change. That evening, Rosa completed her shift at 5 p.m. She said goodbye to each girl individually, kneeling, making eye contact, even when none was returned, whispering something Marcus couldn't hear through the cameras. Then she left. Marcus reviewed the footage that night, bourbon in hand, scanning for red flags. Hands in the wrong drawers, phones recording what they shouldn't. anything that justified the warning bells ringing in his mind. He found nothing, just patient, gentle care. Rosa adjusting blankets with deliberate slowness. Rosa singing softly during medication time. Rosa talking to his daughters like they mattered, like their silence was temporary, like they could hear every word and hold it inside them. But something did bother him. The timestamp on the footage showed Rosa leaving at 5:43 p.m., 43 minutes past her scheduled shift. Marcus rewound. There she was, sitting in the rocking chair Catherine had chosen, reading a picture book aloud to three girls who showed no sign of listening. Unpaid time, unpaid effort. Marcus opened Rosa's employment file and typed a note. Watch for exploitation angles. Overtime manipulation potential. He closed the laptop and poured another bourbon. But that night, for the first time in months, Marcus Holloway slept for 3 hours straight. No nightmares, no waking to check the monitors, just silence and, briefly, rest. And downstairs in the therapy room, Isabella's dinner tray sat mostly empty. She'd eaten half her meal, more than she'd managed in 2 weeks. Marcus told himself it meant nothing. But deep in his chest, in a place he'd locked away 18 months ago, something very small began to crack. Week 2 began the same way Week 1 had ended. Rosa arriving at exactly 7 a.m., greeting the night nurse with quiet efficiency, reviewing sleep charts and medication logs with the careful attention of someone who understood that details mattered. Marcus watched from his office, coffee cooling in his hand, as she completed her morning checklist without deviation. Then, she sat down. This was becoming her pattern. 10 minutes of stillness before the day's care routine began. She would position herself in the center of the therapy room, cross-legged on the floor, and simply watch the girls. Not with clinical assessment, but with something closer to study. Learning their rhythms, their breathing patterns, the small shifts in expression that everyone else missed. On Tuesday morning, Rosa pulled a small portable speaker from her canvas bag, the same one from last week. She set it on the shelf and pressed play. Soft piano music filled the room, delicate and precise. Chopin. Marcus recognized it from Catherine's collection. Grace's fingers twitched. It was subtle, barely noticeable, but Marcus saw it clearly on the monitor. Grace's right hand, usually motionless on her wheelchair armrest, moved toward the sound. Just an inch, maybe less, but intentional. Rosa noticed too. She didn't react dramatically, didn't call attention to it. She simply adjusted the volume slightly higher and continued preparing Isabella's morning feeding routine, humming along with the melody. Marcus made a note in his observation log. Music response, Grace, requires further monitoring. It was Thursday morning when Marcus noticed something strange. He'd been reviewing the previous night's security footage, a habit that had become obsessive ritual. When the living room camera showed something unexpected. Furniture had been moved. The coffee table sat pushed against the far wall. The oriental rug lay rolled up in the corner. An open space dominated the center of the room, and along the perimeter, positioned carefully like sentinels, sat 3 empty wheelchairs. Marcus's pulse quickened. He checked the timestamp, 11:47 p.m. Well after Rosa's shift ended at 5 p.m. He rewound further and found her. Rosa entering the living room at 11:32 p.m., dressed in comfortable clothes instead of her work uniform, moving with quiet purpose. She rearranged the furniture methodically, then disappeared down the hallway toward the therapy room. Marcus fast-forwarded. At 11:51 p.m., Rosa returned carrying Isabella in her arms. She laid the child gently on padded floor mats in the center of the cleared space. Then she went back for Grace. Then Lily. All 3 girls, lifted from their beds, positioned on the floor while the house slept. Marcus's hand hovered over his phone. This was a massive protocol violation. Moving the children without authorization, working off hours without supervision, conducting unauthorized therapy. Grounds for immediate termination. But he didn't call. Instead, he watched. Rosa knelt beside Isabella first. She placed her hands on the child's small legs, left hand on the thigh, right hand on the calf, and began to massage in slow, deliberate circles. Her movements followed a pattern, starting at the hip, working down to the knee, then ankle, then foot. She bent Isabella's knee gently, pushing it toward the chest, then extending it fully, again and again. "Así, mi amor," Rosa whispered, too quiet for the camera to pick up clearly. "Your muscles remember this. Your body knows." She moved to the other leg, repeating the pattern with patient consistency. Then she positioned a toy, a soft, stuffed elephant, just beyond Isabella's reach. Not far, maybe 8 inches from her hand, but far enough that reaching would require effort, require the child to stretch muscles that doctors said were permanently damaged. "Can you touch it, Isabella?" Rosa encouraged softly. "I know you can. Just a little stretch." Isabella's arm trembled. Her fingers moved slowly, painfully slowly, extending toward the elephant. Marcus leaned closer to the monitor, breath caught in his throat. Isabella touched the toy. Rosa's face broke into a wide smile. "Yes. Oh, Princessa, yes. Look at what you just did." She moved to Grace next, guiding the child's hands to help her into a supported kneeling position. Rosa held Grace's weight, supporting her from behind, singing softly in Spanish. Something about birds and morning light. While Grace's legs shook with the effort of bearing even a fraction of her own weight. Hour after hour, Rosa worked. Massage, stretching, assisted kneeling, reaching exercises. She placed toys strategically, encouraged movement, celebrated microscopic victories. At 12:43 a.m., she helped Lily roll from back to side, a movement so small Marcus might have missed it if he wasn't watching so intently. The timestamp on the footage read 1:17 a.m., when Rosa finally carried the girls back to their beds one by one, tucking them in with whispered words Marcus couldn't hear. She did this on her own time, unpaid. After a full day's shift, after everyone else had gone home, Marcus sat frozen in his office chair. The footage paused on Rosa's tired face as she left the living room. Every professional instinct screamed at him to fire her immediately. She was violating medical protocol. The doctors had been clear. Exercise was pointless for spinal injuries this severe. The nerve damage was permanent. What Rosa was doing wasn't therapy. It was cruel false hope that would devastate his daughters when it inevitably failed. But something stopped him from reaching for his phone. Isabella had laughed yesterday, actually laughed, at one of Rosa's silly songs during diaper change. A real laugh, bright and sudden. The first Marcus had heard since before the accident. Grace reached for Rosa now when she entered the room, tiny fingers stretching toward warmth and familiarity instead of staring blankly at nothing. And Lily, silent Lily, who hadn't spoken a word in 18 months, had whispered Rosa at breakfast 2 days ago. The night nurse had reported it with stunned disbelief, and Marcus had checked the audio footage 3 times to confirm it was real. These weren't nothing. These were something. Marcus pulled up the previous week's footage and began watching from the beginning. Night after night, the same routine. Rosa arriving at 11:30 p.m., moving furniture, carrying his daughters to the floor, working with patient determination until past 1 a.m., Massage, stretching, assisted weight-bearing, reaching exercises. Patterns Marcus recognized from rehabilitation journals he'd stopped reading a year ago when hope became too dangerous to hold. At 3:17 a.m., Marcus was still watching. His bourbon sat untouched, his notes covering 3 pages. He saw Rosa's unwavering belief manifest in every movement. The way she spoke to the girls, like recovery was inevitable, not impossible. "Come on, Isabella. I know you can feel this. Your body remembers," she whispered in footage from Monday night. "See, Grace, your legs are strong. They're just learning how to work again," from Wednesday. "Sweet Lily, you're trying so hard. I'm so proud of you," from last night. Marcus stayed up until dawn, watching and taking notes. Rosa's techniques followed patterns similar to neuroplasticity therapy, the controversial rehabilitation approach that suggested the brain could form new neural pathways to bypass damaged areas. He'd read about it 18 months ago, dismissed it as fringe science when the doctors assured him it wouldn't work for injuries this severe. But how did a woman with no formal training, no medical degree, no certifications, know these techniques? Marcus pulled up Rosa's background check file as the sun rose outside his window. He scanned past the basic information, address, references, employment history, to the personal notes section he'd barely glanced at during the interview. There, buried in the middle of the page, was a single line he'd overlooked. Mother, Maria Teresa Martinez. Stroke-induced paralysis, 2015. Doctors predicted permanent disability. Patient recovered partial mobility after 3 years of home rehabilitation. Walked with assistance at time of death, 2023. Marcus stared at the words. Rosa's mother had been paralyzed. The doctors had said permanent, and Rosa had spent 3 years working with her, believing recovery was possible when medical professionals said it wasn't. She'd learned by doing, by refusing to accept never as final. And it had worked. Marcus closed his laptop slowly. The morning light was streaming through his office window, casting long shadows across the monitors that still showed his daughters sleeping peacefully in their beds. Rosa would arrive in 43 minutes to begin her official shift, unaware that Marcus had spent the entire night watching her secret midnight routine. He should fire her. She was breaking every rule, defying medical expertise, filling his daughters with hope that would shatter them when their bodies refused to cooperate. But what if she was right? The thought terrified him more than anything had in 18 months. What if hope wasn't dangerous? What if giving up was? Marcus pressed his palms against his eyes, exhaustion and confusion warring in his chest. He didn't know what to believe anymore. Didn't know if he could survive watching his daughters try and fail. If he could endure hope breaking him all over again the way Catherine's death had broken him the first time. But downstairs, Isabella had laughed. Grace had reached. Lily had spoken. And somewhere in the small hours of morning, while the world slept, a woman with no credentials was fighting for his daughters with nothing but patient hands and unwavering belief. Marcus sat in the growing light, conflicted and afraid, holding the smallest, most dangerous seed of hope he'd felt since the day Catherine died. The call came just after sunrise, shrill and unexpected, pulling Marcus out of one of the rare hours he actually slept. Dr. Chen's office, requesting an emergency meeting. No details. Marcus's stomach dropped instantly. Every scenario a flashing disaster. Infection, regression, another bad turn. Experience had taught him to expect nothing but new loss. He drove to the clinic in silence, knuckles white on the steering wheel. The route was familiar. The same streets he'd traveled overnight for emergencies, for admissions, for heartbreaking consultations. Today, He braced for another death sentence, not his own, but another piece of his daughter's. Dr. Chen met him in person, which was unusual. The neurologist was usually brisk, efficient, and emotionally removed. But this morning, her face was a puzzle of confusion and hope. Marcus felt a chill, the kind that came right before the worst news. She ushered him into the examination room, closed the door, and turned on a series of monitors. MRI scans illuminated the wall in vibrant layers, before and after, 3 months ago and today. "Mr. Holloway," she began, voice steadier than Marcus expected. "I need to know what changed in your daughter's care routine." Marcus blinked, uncertain what she meant. Dr. Chen traced the MRI images, pointing out the impossible. Muscle development in Isabella's legs, where there should have been only atrophy. Improved nerve response in Grace's lower spine. Synapses firing, communication reestablished. Lily's reflexes, previously absent, now showing subtle but undeniable activity. "You see here?" Chen indicated the ghostly lines of tissue regeneration and electrical activity. "These are not random. Something consistent is happening." Marcus swallowed hard. The words, for a moment, didn't register. Healing was not something he'd been told to expect. "There must be a mistake," Marcus said, searching her face for doubt. "We haven't changed anything in months." But Dr. Chen shook her head. "The results don't lie, Mr. Holloway. Muscle tissue doesn't just regenerate. Neural pathways don't simply reconnect without targeted intervention. Have you started a new therapy program?" Marcus hesitated, thinking back over the last weeks, the midnight routines he'd discovered, Rosa's secret work on the mats, her gentle encouragement, the way his daughters were stretching, kneeling, reaching. Could it be? Was this possible? Dr. Chen continued, "Whatever you're doing at home, do not stop. I don't care if it's unconventional. Recent work on pediatric spinal cord injuries and neuroplasticity is proving the nervous system, especially in children, can recover function once considered impossible. Activity-dependent plasticity and repetitive training are changing the trajectory for families like yours when done with correct intensity and frequency." She emailed him research studies. Children who made gains well after their diagnoses, with therapists who refused to accept permanent limits. "Your daughters may be responding to movement therapy just as Kyle Bartolini did. He regained mobility with locomotor training and activity-based restorative therapy, defying prognosis. The younger the patient, the greater the nervous system's flexibility. We're seeing recoveries we once thought were science fiction." Marcus left her office in a daze, head spinning with possibility and disbelief. That night, Marcus pulled up 30 days of security footage. Not just random sampling, he watched in sequence, from the first night Rosa began her secret routine. The quiet hours, the rearranged furniture, the padded mats. Rosa lifting the girls from their beds, kneeling beside them, hands guiding muscles and joints in patient patterns. Never forcing, just inviting. Always celebrating little victories, the wiggle of a toe, the tremor of a knee, the reach for a toy. She spoke to them, sometimes in Spanish, sometimes in English. "Breathe, Isabella. You are stronger than you think. Grace, feel the floor beneath you. It belongs to you. Lily, you are moving. Every night, a little more." The camera captured the quiet miracles. Rosa's work was gentle, unhurried, but relentless. Every night from 11 to 1. Marcus made notes. Her technique mirrored neuroplasticity protocols, repetitive, intentional movement, patient encouragement, positive feedback. He saw her help the girls bear weight, guide them into kneeling, reach for objects just outside their comfort zone. Sometimes a song, sometimes a laugh, always belief. Never once did she grow frustrated or lose patience. He pulled up medical journals, chasing the thread Dr. Chen had given him. Studies on children whose spinal cords learned to reroute signals, whose bodies responded after hundreds of hours of training, whose families reported recovery long believed impossible. Articles spoke of plasticity, activity-based restorative therapy, and the difference between medical impossibility and statistical improbability. What Rosa was doing had scientific backing. She just knew it instinctively from years with her mother, from the hard lessons of persistence and faith. By sunrise, Marcus sat surrounded by open tabs, research papers, and notes he'd scribbled in the dark. He was wide awake, not with anxiety, but with the shock of hope. For 5 weeks, Rosa had performed miracle-level physical therapy every night, unpaid, out of quiet belief. She invited movement, celebrated subtle progress, coaxed recovery not just with her hands, but with her unwavering certainty that healing was possible. Marcus had watched her, documented her methods, and never once said thank you. He had almost fired her for breaking protocol, for daring to believe when he couldn't. Tomorrow, he decided, he would finally talk to her. Not through the intercom, not as supervisors scrutinizing footage, but as someone ready to ask what hope felt like and how she made it real. For tonight, Marcus switched from recorded footage to live feed, determined not to miss the next miracle. In the blue glow of the monitors, something essential changed. For the first time in months, Marcus didn't feel like a warden or distant observer. He was a father learning to hope again, taught patiently by a woman who refused to let his daughters remain still when the world said they must. Week 7, 11:47 p.m. Marcus sat at his desk with bourbon in hand, eyes fixed on the glowing monitors. This time, he wasn't watching recordings. He was watching live. His heart pounded with anticipation, a strange mix of fear and hope he hadn't felt since Catherine was alive. Rosa entered the living room, the furniture already rearranged into the familiar pattern. Coffee table pushed aside, rug rolled up, open hardwood space in the center. The 3 wheelchairs lined against the far wall like silent witnesses. She was dressed in her usual simple navy dress and white apron, hair pulled back in a neat bun, moving with the quiet efficiency of someone who'd done this ritual dozens of times before. Marcus leaned forward, barely breathing. Rosa disappeared down the hallway and returned moments later carrying Isabella. She'd changed the girls out of their pajamas and into matching yellow shirts and denim overalls. Practical clothing that allowed easier mobility, Marcus realized. She positioned Isabella in the center of the room, then went back for Grace, then Lily. But this time was different. Instead of laying them on the padded mats, Rosa carefully lifted each girl to a standing position, supporting their weight from behind. One by one, she positioned them side by side, their small hands clasped together, bare feet flat on the warm hardwood floor. Their legs trembled with the effort, but they stood. Marcus's pulse hammered in his ears. Rosa moved to the portable speaker and pressed play. Claire de Lune filled the room, soft, delicate piano notes that seemed to float through the space like light through water. The same piece Catherine had played on quiet Sunday mornings, when hope still felt safe. Then Rosa did something that made Marcus grip the edge of his desk. She stepped back 6 feet and knelt low, arms outstretched toward the girls, positioned like someone waiting to catch something precious. Her face radiated absolute belief, no doubt, no fear, no hesitation. Just certainty that what was about to happen was not only possible, but inevitable. "You can do this, Miss Amores," Rosa whispered, her voice barely audible through the camera's speakers. I know you can. Your mama is watching from heaven, and she believes in you too. Marcus's breath caught. Isabella moved first. Her left foot slid forward along the hardwood, just a few inches, wobbly and uncertain. Then her right foot. She was walking, actually walking. She pulled her sisters forward by their joined hands, leading them toward Rosa's waiting arms, like a tiny general refusing to accept defeat. Grace giggled. A bright, sudden sound that hadn't existed in this house for 18 months. She stumbled slightly, her legs shaking with effort, but caught herself, finding balance Marcus thought she'd never have again. Lily beamed, barefoot and brave, tears streaming down her small face as she took step after impossible step. Not perfect steps, not steady ones, but real movement propelled by will and muscle and nerve pathways the doctors had declared permanently severed. They walked, all three of them, holding hands, moving toward Rosa's outstretched arms. The distance was short, maybe 6 feet, but it might as well have been 6 miles. Marcus watched his paralyzed daughters do what every neurologist, every specialist, every expensive consultant had said they would never, ever do again. Marcus's bourbon glass shattered against his desk. The sound registered distantly, but he didn't notice, couldn't notice. His vision blurred with tears he didn't remember starting to cry. He couldn't breathe, couldn't move, body frozen in place as his mind tried to process what his eyes were witnessing. The man who built a tech empire on algorithms and logic, who believed in data and medical certainty, watched that certainty shatter on a screen in his own home. All his control, all his surveillance systems, all his money and connections and desperate attempts to fix what was broken. None of it had created this miracle. This came from patient hands and unwavering faith. From a woman who worked unpaid for hours every night because she refused to accept never as final. From belief that persisted when expertise said to give up. Isabella, Grace, and Lily collapsed into Rosa's arms, giggling and crying and exhausted from the effort. Rosa pulled them close, tears streaming down her own face, whispering words Marcus couldn't hear but felt in his chest. I knew it, she sobbed. I knew you could. Marcus didn't remember standing up, didn't remember deciding to move. One moment he was frozen at his desk, the next he was running, something he hadn't done in 18 months. Down the office stairs, feet pounding against marble. Through the long hallway where family photos used to hang, nearly slipping as he rounded the corner. His heart threatened to burst through his ribs. His breath came in ragged gasps. He burst through the living room doors just as Rosa caught all 3 girls in her arms, holding them against her chest like they were made of light and love and everything impossible made real. The 4 of them turned toward him, Rosa and his 3 daughters standing. Marcus froze in the doorway, hand flying to his mouth, unable to move forward. Unable to believe what he was seeing, even though it was right there in front of him, solid and undeniable. Daddy, Isabella said, her voice bright and clear. The words shattered something in Marcus's chest. He couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything but stand there with tears streaming down his face, and his whole world rewriting itself in real time. Rosa looked at him with gentle understanding, her own face wet with tears. She nodded at him, arms still holding his daughters steady. Come, she said softly. They want to show you. Marcus took one trembling step forward, then another. His legs barely held him, but he moved anyway, drawn toward the impossible sight of his daughters, standing on their own 2 feet, alive and moving and defying every prognosis that had stolen his hope 18 months ago. Isabella reached for him, small hands stretching toward her father. Grace and Lily did the same, all three of them wobbling but standing, waiting for him to close the distance he'd created with cameras and control and fear. And Marcus Holloway, the man who thought he'd lost everything that mattered, realized he'd been given a second chance. Not just for his daughters to heal, but for him to finally show up and be present for the miracle that had been happening all along, just outside the frame of his monitors, in the patient hands of a woman who refused to let impossible be final. Marcus's legs gave out. He dropped to his knees and crawled across the hardwood floor, unable to trust his body to carry him the final distance. His vision blurred with tears, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "I'm sorry," he sobbed, voice breaking. "I'm so sorry I stopped believing." The girls stumbled toward him, their steps wobbly but determined, Rosa's steadying hands guiding them from behind. Isabella reached him first, tiny arms wrapping around his neck. Grace and Lily followed, collapsing into his embrace, all four of them tangled together on the floor. Father and daughters. Together, present, real. Marcus held them and wept. 18 months of grief poured out, the shame of watching through screens instead of being there, the fear that had paralyzed him more completely than any injury ever could, the buried hope he'd locked away because hoping felt more dangerous than giving up. He held his daughters, not through pixels and monitors, not from the safe distance of his office, but fully present as they stood together, wobbly but standing, alive and moving, and more than any prognosis had allowed them to be. Isabella's small hand touched his cheek, her voice soft and clear. "Don't cry, Daddy. We're okay now." The words shattered what remained of Marcus's carefully constructed walls. Rosa stepped back, tears streaming down her own face, giving them space. She knelt on the floor a few feet away, hands folded in her lap, watching this reunion she'd worked 7 weeks to make possible. Marcus looked up at her through blurred vision, his daughters still clinging to him. "How?" he asked, voice raw. "How did you know?" Rosa smiled gently, wiping her eyes. "They never stopped believing in themselves, Mr. Holloway. They just needed someone to believe with them." She moved closer, kneeling beside the tangled family. "My mother had a stroke when I was 22. The doctors said she'd never walk again, never speak, never feed herself. They used that word, never, like it was a diagnosis, not a guess." Rosa's voice grew quiet. "But I spent 3 years with her, every day, moving her legs even when she couldn't feel them, singing to her even when she couldn't respond. And slowly, slowly, her body remembered. 3 years, Mr. Holloway. 3 years before she took her first step." Marcus stared at her, understanding dawning. "The doctors said never," Rosa continued. "But never is only true if you stop trying. Your daughters have young nervous systems, adaptable brains. Children with spinal injuries can rewire pathways adults can't. Neuroplasticity works miracles in children when you give it time, repetition, and belief." She looked at Isabella, Grace, and Lily with such tenderness Marcus felt his chest tighten. "I knew they could do this. I just had to help them remember." Marcus took a shaking breath. "I've been watching you," he admitted. "For weeks. The midnight routines, the exercises, everything. I expected to catch you stealing, or failing, or..." His voice broke. "Instead, I caught you performing miracles." Rosa's smile turned sad. "I know about the cameras, Mr. Holloway. I've always known." Marcus's breath caught. "Then why didn't you say anything?" "Because you needed to see it yourself," Rosa said gently. "You needed to believe it was real. If I'd told you what I was doing, you would have stopped me." You would have fired me the first night." She paused. "You needed to watch them heal so you could start healing too." The truth of it hit Marcus like a physical blow. He'd spent 18 months protecting his daughters from imagined threats, bad caregivers, false hope, more loss, while the real threat was his own absence. His paranoia had turned him into a ghost in his own home, a warden watching life through screens instead of living it. Catherine would have believed like Rosa did. Catherine would have fought with everything she had, would have spent every midnight on the floor with their daughters, would have refused to accept never as an answer. But Catherine was gone, and Marcus had let grief turn him into something hollow. "I don't know how to thank you," Marcus whispered. "I don't know how to repay." Rosa stopped him with a gentle hand on his shoulder. "You don't repay miracles, Mr. Holloway. You honor them by showing up." That night, Marcus didn't return to his office. He stayed in the living room with Rosa and the girls until exhaustion claimed them all. Isabella fell asleep in his lap, Grace curled against his side, Lily's head on his shoulder. They were warm and real, and alive in ways surveillance footage could never capture. When Rosa finally stood to leave at 2 a.m., Marcus looked up at her. "Tomorrow, 7 a.m. I want to learn. Teach me what you know." Rosa smiled, tears fresh in her eyes. "I'll see you then, Mr. Holloway." Marcus carried each daughter to bed himself. The first time since Catherine died that he'd performed this simple ritual of fatherhood. He tucked Isabella in first, brushing hair from her forehead, kissing her gently. Then Grace, then Lily. He whispered to each of them, "I see you now. I promise I see you." And for the first time in 18 months, Marcus didn't return to his office to review footage. He pulled a chair beside their beds and sat there in the darkness, watching them breathe, finally present. Dawn light streaming through the therapy room windows woke him. Marcus opened his eyes to find himself still in the chair, neck stiff, but more rested than he'd felt in months. The monitors on the wall were dark. He hadn't turned them on. At exactly 7 a.m., Rosa arrived. She stopped in the doorway when she saw him, surprise flickering across her face before softening into understanding. They shared coffee in silence, the first peaceful moment between them. Marcus watched her prepare the girls' morning routine with the same gentle patience she brought to everything, and realized he'd been watching her work for 7 weeks without ever truly seeing her. "I want to be present," Marcus said finally. "Not through cameras. Actually here. Will you teach me?" Rosa studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "The cameras stay, but you come out from behind them. Deal?" "Deal." 3 months later, the fountain in the back garden ran clear and bright, water catching sunlight in rainbow prisms. Marcus had called someone to fix it the day after the girls first walked. The sound of flowing water filled the estate, replacing the oppressive silence with something alive. Isabella, Grace, and Lily walked hand in hand across the garden path toward the fountain, their steps steadier now, more confident. They wore the same yellow shirts and denim overalls Rosa had dressed them in that miraculous night, and their laughter rang out clear and bright, a sound Marcus had forgotten could exist in his home. They reached the fountain and squealed with delight, splashing water at each other, getting soaked and not caring at all. Rosa watched from the patio, arms crossed, smiling with quiet satisfaction. Marcus stood beside her, not in his office watching monitors, not checking his phone for alerts, just standing there with his eyes on his daughters, present and believing and alive. "Thank you," Marcus said quietly, "for not giving up on them, for not giving up on me." Rosa turned to him, her expression gentle. "You gave up on yourself, Mr. Holloway, But your daughters never gave up on you. They were just waiting for you to come back. Marcus watched Isabella lift Lily to touch the fountain spray. Watched Grace spin in circles with her arms out. Watched all three of them live in a way doctors said they never would. And he finally understood what Rosa had been trying to teach him all along. Miracles don't happen on schedules or follow medical predictions. They happen in midnight routines, in patient hands, in the quiet faith of those who refuse to accept impossible. They happen in the space between never and what if. In the courage to try when expertise says to quit, in the relentless belief that recovery is possible even when probability says otherwise. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, they happen in time for you to witness them, not through a screen, but standing right there, close enough to be changed by them forever. Marcus stepped off the patio and walked toward his daughters, leaving his phone behind, leaving the cameras unwatched, choosing presence over protection. Isabella saw him coming and ran, into his arms. Grace and Lily following close behind, all three of them soaking wet and laughing and whole. And Marcus Holloway, the man who'd lost everything and almost lost even more by refusing to hope, held his daughters in the sunlight and finally understood what it meant to be alive again. Marcus spent 18 months watching life through cameras because he was too afraid to hope again, and he almost missed the miracle happening right in front of him. If that just hit you in the chest, if you've ever been the person hiding behind screens or control or fear, then prove you were here. Subscribe so you catch every story that shows you what's possible when you choose presence over protection. Then drop a comment. What was your favorite part of Marcus and Rosa's story? The midnight exercises? The doctor's impossible news? The moment the girls took their first steps? Or the final scene at the fountain when Marcus finally learned to be present? Your comment isn't just engagement. It's proof that this story mattered. And when the next person struggling with grief and fear stumbles onto this video, your words in the comments might be exactly what convinces them to keep watching, to keep hoping, to keep showing up. Subscribe. Comment your favorite moment. Be part of why stories like this reach the people who need them most.